Hello, everybody. I'm native from here, Saskatchewan, actually. I lived in Utah for about 25 years. While I was in Utah, I jumped full uh, hilt into bees. In about 2008, the economy tanked, and I had to try and think of what else I could do other than general contracting. And I had thought, well, maybe I could do my bees. And I thought, well, no. Long and short of it is one of the thoughts that I had was that I could incorporate my experience that I had at that time with construction and bees by doing bee removals, where I'd advertise and go and work at removing bees, whether it's a simple one hanging on a branch or if it was inside a wall. uh, I understand the building, so I could remove them. Well, the sad thing is at the beginning, almost 99% of my calls were for wasps and hornets and things that I didn't want. I wanted honeybees. I didn't want all this other stuff. And so I had to learn to ask the right questions and try to figure out how I could zoom into what it was that I really wanted. And so initially, my conversations would be through text. Can you send me a picture? What color are they? And people would regularly try to school me on what they felt a bee was. And a bee, there's actually a lot of different, there's 8,000 different bees here in North America. So the media teaches everybody wrong. It teaches everybody that bees are yellow and black. And so regularly I would ask, what are their colors? And people would say they're yellow, canary yellow. Are they furry or not furry? If they're not furry, they're wasps or something other than a honeybee and other than a bumblebee. If they're furry, I would know that they were bumblebees. So I was able to zoom in to the things that I really wanted at that time, and that was honeybees. As time went on, I got more and more calls in Utah for bumblebees. In 2019, at the end of the year, I decided to move back home. So I brought everything that I thought I had there here and started up a little company called Saskatoon Bee Removal. The reason? Saskatoon is the location, bee is the focus, removal is what I do. It's the action. And it's the one I had in Utah was Utah bee removal. So it was very easy for people to find you, very easy to start getting leads. Well, here in Saskatchewan, there's not many swarms and cutouts compared to Utah. Utah, there were up to what, 100 a year cutouts. Here, the big focus in Saskatchewan is bumblebees. We have lots and lots of bumblebees. And so 4 years ago, I started spending more time in trying to figure out how to remove bumblebees. And so thus the title. I'm a beekeeper. I don't do bumbles though. I just do bees, which it's still a bee. We do honeybees. And so um, the neat thing is with being a beekeeper, a honeybee beekeeper, is you have all the skills and all of the equipment you need, all in all, to take care of bumblebees as well as honeybees. And so you have the suit, you have the gloves, their cycles are relatively the same. And so uh, people are scared of them. They buzz, they sting, their dogs get stung, their kids get stung. And the sad thing is, uh, bumblebees would rather not be close to anybody or affect anyone. But sadly, they do. So, on to the class. The life cycle of a bumblebee, historically, they were called humblebees. So if you go back into books back in the 1800s or beyond, they're actually referred to as humble. Some of the books today will actually say bumble or humble. I just think Humble is a really fascinating little uh, view of what this bee is. So to start off, a queen bee lives from midsummer to midsummer, and it's late midsummer to late midsummer. Uh, so they live 1 year. That's all they live. Um, they mate relatively quickly after they emerge. They can fly in colder temps than honeybees. They can fly in the rain, which is kind of unique because these are things that restrict our honeybees. In spring, the queen starts off by laying a whole bunch of workers. Up until then, she's doing all the work. She's filling the cells. She's bringing in pollen. She's doing everything. And once the workers come out, then she doesn't leave. She stays in this nest. So you have to remember that because that's key throughout this whole thing. The workers are the ones that are leaving. They can be different sizes. You'll see big ones, you'll see small ones. They're workers. Uh, it's a nest. It's not a hive, it's a nest. The difference in between a hive and a nest is made up of stuff from the local area. It can be in Utah. I saw ones that were made up of pig hair because that's what they had access to. They can have wrappers, they can have grass clippings, bark, anything. And in some that I'll show you today, there was one, the lady had llama wool, and the bumblebees stole it and have used it for bedding. So it's not a nest, it's not a hive, it's a nest. Just like a bird nest, they bring it together. But the center of this nest, there are honey pots. Teeny weeny little pots about the size of the tip of your finger. Some are big, some are small. Uh, some have honey, some have bees. But they have these little honey pots and they're made out of wax, just like for the honeybees. Pollen is placed near the young. And the neat thing here is I haven't seen the pollen put into cells like you would see in a honeybee colony. They are big clumps of goo that they put in there that is right in the center of where all the babies are. And so it's not pounded and stuff like what we would see in a honeybee hive. It tastes the same. It looks the same as what the honeybees would have in their hive for bee bread. The worker life cycles are about the same as honeybees. So they don't have a long period of time that they live, just like the honeybee. They work themselves relatively to death, and the queen is replacing them. Midsummer, uh, there are new queens that are laid. And once those are laid, the old queen dies. And we kind of think that that's all. Well, the new queens that emerge, one will decide whether it is going to keep that nest. And none of them might keep the nest, but one of them could keep the nest, and the other ones go into the neighborhood. And they start again in fall, bringing in stuff and preparing themselves for winter. And I've always taught that they stay active throughout the winter. But other things that I've read is they just stay relatively still. It's almost like hibernation. And then in spring, they start up. They fly out earlier in spring than a honeybee would. They start bringing back stuff, pollen and nectar. And once they have that little pot made, they lay eggs all around, and those bees have their food when they emerge. So where do bumbles or bumblebees live? They live in a nest. They prefer locations in the ground. The ground could be a gopher hole, it could be a rat hole, a mouse hole, it could be an old hole that was used by wasps or hornets. They love being right up against the foundation of a house because when people build the houses and they backfill the cement, they don't pack it in. And so there's lots of voids right up against the concrete. And that's one of their favorite places that I see. Compost heaps. There's one that I have on YouTube that I refer to as a albino bumblebee. And just know that when bumblebees first emerge, they come out, they aren't the color that we see in the end, they are white and black. And so I thought, wow, I found this fantastic albino bumblebee nest, and no, they just haven't acquired their color. But it shows a whole bunch of bees inside a compost heap. Insulation. Insulation is perfect for them. Just think of all the places that insulation can be. It can be in your walls of your house, where anything from a gas line, a uh, coax line, anything that punctures in through the house that doesn't get sealed, bees can go in there. They can go in through your dryer vents, heating vents, anywhere. If they can get into your attic, they love insulation. It's perfect for them. It's like they don't have to bring anything in, they have it. Wood piles and brick piles. It's a place that is relatively sheltered. It is dark. It's protected. Things can't get to it. And the last one, which is just a blast, is they love bird nests. I think that they love bird nests even more than birds like, meaning bird houses. That bumblebees like bird houses, I think, more than birds like bird houses. Um, they underneath sheds, that little crawl space, if it's close to the ground. They can also be inside old furniture that's left outside that has batting and stuff in the back. Um, Hot tubs, big, huge issue with hot tubs because they're never sealed from the bottom or the top ridge. There's lots of places for them to get in. And yeah, birdhouses are the prime real estate. So I regularly get calls, emails, text messages throughout the season. I have a page set up on Facebook that allows people to type it in and they can send messages. And I get comments like these. Hey, do you come to homes to do bee removals? Which the answer is yes, I do. We have a bumblebee nest, which most people don't know that, somewhere under our deck. Okay, I need to see the deck. I need to see what I'd be working with. So I always say send a photo of the deck. And if I can, I also want to see a bee. I want to see one of the bugs that are going in. Because regularly people will get them wrong, mixed up with wasps. And so in this case, they show me this tiny little crack. Well, they're not just underneath the boards. They're typically under the boards and in the dirt. So if I can't get in there, I can't remove them. I can't relocate them. It's not like you can do a trap out like you would for honeybees. So the second one is what are they under? Send photos. There's a crack in the foundation in the front of the house that they're living in. Well, underneath your front steps, the concrete steps, the dirt underneath will sag and settle. Bumblebees love being in there. They also go in and then down along the foundation. So unless I can get it in there, I can't remove them. There's not a dang thing I can do if they're underneath cement. A crack in your concrete in your garage, and they have found a way in. Well, how do they get into the inside of the garage when the door's closed? Either side of your overhead door, when it comes down, there's usually a little gap on the corners. And the bumblebees will find their way in through that little seal on the corner of your garage door, and they'll search everywhere on the inside of that garage for a place that they can live. It's private. There's no water. It's a perfect place for them. And so this other one, which is really rather fun and funny, is there a way to this? here is hiding it, to stun them so that we can take the side of the wall down. That's funny because we can't, but for this whole thing to do with wasps, hornets, honeybees, bumblebees, there is a way that almost anybody can go and take care of these issues. Buy a bee suit with some gloves. As soon as you have your Iron Man suit on, you can go to a hornet's nest that's hanging from a tree. You can put a bag around it, cut the branch, and you can haul it away, wherever they might be. If you have a suit on, you have more chance of doing stuff. But as beekeepers, we know that you can also be stung to a suit. And bumblebees can sting again and again and again and again and again. And they have a little bit of a character in that they're trying to scare the heck out of you first. And so when a bumblebee gets to a place where they're wanting to sting, they'll first attach themselves to you, and then they make this noise that just sends you through the roof before they even sting. And you're already screaming before you even got stung because this thing is basically letting you know, here it's coming, it's coming. So it's kind of giving you a chance to get out of there. But if it's already to that point, it's holding on to you really, really well. And again, they can sting you again and again and again. So can you do something where you can stun them so that we can take this wall down? And no, but you can put a bee suit on. With bumblebees, smoke really doesn't do anything to them. So when you get in, you are just methodical. You get into where they're at. You're very gentle, and we'll go through it. But some can be relocated, some can't. And people get mad at me and, oh, you're supposed to be able to do all sorts of room. Well, no, I can't remove them from underneath the concrete floor. Um, you can kill them in that case. You can seal it up. You can force them to find a different way in and out that isn't so intrusive to you. Um, but I'll get calls where their dogs are getting stung. Well, are your dogs chasing them? Well, yeah. Well, it's your dog's fault. It's not the bee's fault. But sometimes bumblebees go in places where they just shouldn't. And we have to live somehow in harmony with each other. And sometimes they're right at the door where you're going in and out, and they think that you're attacking them. And it's just, it's bad. And so there's some times where there isn't an option. The option is to kill them. And then there's other options where we can remove them. And so here, you'll see that elevator beehive or birdhouse. That one was really kind of fun. That was on the west side of Saskatoon. The lady had purchased this almost 3 decades ago. She had it up on a fence. She had actually birdhouses all the way around her fence in the backyard. The fun thing with this one is it's filled with llama wool. She bought a whole bunch of wool, put it underneath her deck because that's where her storage was. There was no way to keep things out, and the bumblebees stole this llama wool until that little elevator was completely full. And so that's their bedding. They're opportunists. The one below it is a little hole going into a house wall. Unless I can open up that wall, I can't remove them. A real big caveat with removing bees and going under decks and stuff. There was a deck here in Saskatoon that had to be 25 feet from the house to the outside edge of the deck. And the bumblebees were going in from the edge of the deck. And so I told them, unless I can see where they're going in and get to them, I can't do anything. So he took off some boards at the edge of the deck so that we could look in. And we followed that bumblebee or the bumblebee progression. They would land on the ground and they would walk. And we took off some planks. We saw them walk. They passed. We went further down. We took off some more planks and watched them pass. They walked 25 feet underneath that deck all the way up to the house. And then we pulled up planks because we wanted to see if we could still get it. And I dug 4 feet into the ground and I still didn't get to where those bumblebees were. So if they're underneath the deck, it's pretty much impossible. This second photo is a hot tub. They built up a 2 foot deck all the way around it. The bumblebees, which you can see, if you can see my mouse, right there is a bumblebee. And that one is white, yellow, and black, or not yellow, orange, and black. And it's going down into that crevice, down to the bottom, and it's going underneath that hot tub. The hot tub's filled with insulation, motors, and stuff. There's no way that you can get to where those bumblebees are. None. Even killing them is almost impossible because you have to be able to get to where their entrance is, and you can't in this case. The next one that's under the word relocated, that little recess that you see, there was rock up to it on both sides and grass. That was a wood platform that was there. And the honeybee or the bumblebees were actually digging way out beyond the rock. They burrowed a hole underneath the rock all the way to this opening underneath this platform. And that section that you see that is, there's grass clippings, there's wood chips, that was their nest. And so in this case, normally underneath the deck, you can't get them because I would have guessed that they would have gone underneath the shed, but they weren't. They were in this little group that's again about the size of two fists. Then another one in a birdhouse that is about 15 feet in the air. It was fantastic. Perfect place for bumblebees. If you want to attract bumblebees, put up birdhouses. The one underneath, the bumblebees were entering this garage through a little gap, like I had mentioned, in the overhead door, all the way to that corner. And this corner of the garage was filled with birch logs, birch firewood. There was enough firewood there to fill up the whole truck of my box of my pickup. And one of the bonuses of this one was that I got all the wood because they were moving. They had to get it so that people could go into this garage, and they couldn't go into this garage because there were bumblebees. And that one board that is up on top that's almost standing vertically, underneath that is the nest. So they were in a fortress guarded by all this wood, and then they brought in all this grass clippings, and that's where they lived. And so it's very dark, it's dry, it's protected. They can get in and out through the door. It was a fantastic location. So some can be relocated, some cannot. So on the far left, you'll see in my hand is a little part of it. That was a whole nest in one that I opened. And so those are all the little cells, just like you would have in a honeybee frame. And you can see the ones up at the top where the part is opened, just like a queen emerging, they open the top. These don't fight like a honeybee queen would with a sister queen. They all come out and they all do their thing, but that's all made of wax, just like in a bee nest. There's again that a closer photo of that one with the birch bark. So what I do, and I'm going to go more into it, but the box on the far right, everything that is underneath that birch log is in that box. I try to put it in there completely intact. Uh, I don't want to destroy. They have little tunnels, and it's a play gym inside that debris, that nest. And so you want to keep it as good as you can. And every nest is going to have a lot of bees. There can be anywhere from 40 to 400 bumblebees in a nest. So moving the bumbles, just a little side note, that little bumblebee at the top, a friend of mine made that out of porcelain. It sits on my mantle. It's a beautiful little bumblebee. So first you have to identify what the bug is. You have to make sure that it's a bumblebee. Um, Always ask for photos. You don't want to drive to a place and find out that the thing that everybody was positive was honeybees or bumblebees or whatever they were actually are wasps and or flies, and the whole trip and time was all a loss. So ask for photos of the location of where they're going in, because if you can't do anything, if it's underneath the cement pad or underneath your steps, there's not a thing you can do. You can help them eradicate them if that's what you want to do. Um, but you want to see where they're going in. I can't tell you how many I get calls on where they'll say they're getting into my house. I don't know how they're getting in. Well, then you're going to go and you're going to spend time walking around. Bumblebees don't come and go as much as you would a honeybee colony. You can have 50 honeybees coming back and forth and landing and leaving. Bumblebees, it could be 5 minutes in between one coming and going. And so if you're going around a house trying to figure out how they're getting into this house, you could spend an hour or two trying to just come up with that. So until they know how they're getting into the house, you don't really have anything you can do. So this whole procedure is a two-part procedure. You have to go during the daylight. You want to go when you can see stuff, when you can touch things, and you can figure out where they're coming and going. You're going during the daylight with your suit on, your gloves. You're going to be very stealth-like, and you might think that you're really, really careful. They're going to know you're coming, and the way that you know that they know that you're coming is their pitch will all of a sudden increase. This one that was underneath this one deck that I went to was underneath a bunch of logs and different one. And as soon as I got underneath the deck, it was, you could hear them, but you didn't know exactly where they were. So they know that somebody's there, and you got to kind of let them calm down. Once you can get to them and you know that you can get the whole nest, you very carefully lift up that nest as intact as you can, and you can put it into a shoebox. I make a little mini hive. It's a mini urban beehive. I use them for teaching beekeepers, and I use them for raising queens, but they're great for bumblebees. Uh, you're going to take that whole nest as complete as you can. You can even take some of the bedding and stuff that's around that they've been using, and you can put it in the box as well. And you're going to put them in there. If it's a shoebox is cardboard. It has to be placed somewhere where it's not going to get wet later on or transferred into something else. So you're going to leave that with the lid open wherever those bees were. They'll rezone to where all their stuff is in the box. They'll find family, they'll start playing and cleaning up, and you come back after nightfall. So that's two trips. And you come back after nightfall, every one of them is inside that box. You just close it up and you take it away. You take it to a new location. Once you have it in the new location, they need to have some kind of an entrance. You can have the lid partially open. You can have it so before you used it, you can make a little drawbridge hole that you can open up. They'll use it. And even a cardboard box, as long as it stays dry, they'll use it all the rest of the season. Here in my yard right now, I have about 22 bumblebee nests that I've relocated to my yard, and I have lots of honeybees too, but they're all seeming to do well. Um, so there's the shoebox. You can see about how much it fills. You can put more bedding in there. You don't have to, as long as it stays closed. That's sufficient. That's one of my little mini beehives. It locks closed. Those have an entrance at the top for honeybees, but the bottom entrance is what the bumblebees typically use. And it's about 3/8 of an inch, so the bumblebees can go in and out. And a birdhouse, if you're putting them into a birdhouse, you have to have it so that the top can come off, because you're not going to push everything through that front hole. So either that, and even from the bottom, even if you had the bottom off, you're not pushing stuff up from underneath. It has to go in through the top. They'll find the hole because that's the only light. And this particular one was from 3 years ago. It still has bumblebees in it this year. It is completely stuffed with sticks and twigs because it was probably a birdhouse first, but it's stuffed and there have been bees in there every year. So, why do I do bumblebees? Well, I first did it because I liked the little critters and I wanted them in my yard. I didn't initially know how these bumblebees were going to change things in my yard. That has been something that I've learned intimately last year and this year. So some varieties of bumblebees, I'd say most of the ones that we're going to have in the cities, are doorstep foragers, and they travel shorter distances for resources, block instead of miles. So your honeybees, those that have honeybees, you're going to have all these hives in your yard or one hive in your yard, and you're going to hope that those honeybees pollinate your cucumbers and your tomatoes and all your stuff. But they have a hard time finding things close to the hive, meaning your honeybees. They're going to come out, they're going to do their orientation flight. Once they know where home is, they're going to go up and they're going to be gone. And you don't typically see them in your own yard. Yet, for most people, the reason why they got their honeybees is so that they could have pollination in their own yard. But honeybees have a hard time seeing small little things. They want to go to big areas where they can get lots. And because there's thousands and thousands of bees in a honeybee hive, they're looking for places where they can go and get lots of stuff. Whereas a bumblebee, the doorstep foragers, they go blocks instead of miles. And so this spring, what I noticed in my yard is I noticed that I had way more bumblebees than we have ever had. This spring was more wet and cool, and so the honeybees didn't do a great job with the trees that we have here that were all in bloom. But I saw tons and tons of bumblebees on my blooms and blossoms. And then throughout the whole summer, I saw my bumblebees on my borage. I saw my bumblebees throughout my garden. Um, Yet I didn't see my honeybees doing the stuff in my garden. It was almost all bumblebees. So for me, the benefit is one, I got paid to remove the bumblebees. I got to bring them home. In my case, 2 blocks to the west of me is the river. And the river bank is all native, it's just all vegetation. And so my thought is even when I bring the bumblebees back, even if they don't stay here, I have no problem with the bumblebees going to the river or anywhere else that is suitable for them, as long as they're within the area of my yard so that they can do further pollination. So I got paid to remove them. I got paid, or I get the benefit of having them pollinate stuff in my garden and in my yard, which is fantastic. Bumblebees are regularly used, I'm told, even though I haven't found anybody that does it. They're effective in greenhouse pollination. Bumblebees don't get stuck at windows like honeybees do. So honeybees leave the hive and they go 15 to 20 feet away and they do their spiral flights, their orientation flights. And at that point, they're hitting the glass. And once they're there, they have a hard time finding their way back to the nest or the hive. Whereas bumblebees do a great job inside enclosed space like a greenhouse. So if it turns out, like I am sitting now, if I have a bunch of these that survive and do well into next year, it's always worthwhile trying to find other markets of other people that would want to have bumblebees or places that need them in greenhouses or places that have uh, raspberries, strawberries, Saskatoon berries, any other place that they could be put. I have not found bumblebees fighting with honeybees and robbing, and I haven't seen honeybees trying to rob from bumblebees. So they seem to really work together well in my yard and in our area. They don't really cause any problems with each other. If anything, they cover and overlap what things need to be done. And then bumblebees always put on a great show. Everybody loves to see them. They love to see them on a flower, getting all done up with pollen. The big fuzzy guys. Um, why relocate them? In most cases, if they're left where they are, they're going to be killed. So that's one of the options. If you don't do something to relocate them, they're most likely going to be killed. If you can benefit from them and get paid in the meantime, that's a pretty cool bonus. They're doorstep pollinators, so they do better close. They can fly in the rain and cold weather. They're great in spring when the weather is hard on honeybees. Will thoroughly pollinate gardens and plants in your yard. They can manage themselves, so you don't have to be out there inspecting and figuring out what to do and when to pull honey supers off, when to add them. They're not like that. They stay as about the size of a fist to two fists. There's one that I saw in Utah in Provo that there had to be 1,000 honey pots. It was in a suspended ceiling in an old house, and they were living on top of that insulation, and they covered two of those suspended ceiling rectangles. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So they had survived again and again, and they did really, really well. They do not produce excess honey. They do produce a little bit of honey, and some of those little honey pots, there are honey, but it's for their young. Um, and they are a pollinator workhorse. If we had bumblebees in our beehives doing what our beehives do in thousands, we would just have an incredible amount of work done. The financial benefits: added fruit, produce, pollination. Uh, People will have them. They don't have any problem. I've charged anywhere from $50 to $100 per visit, and people pay it. At that point, I have to come with equipment. I have to come prepared to most likely be there twice. If it's further away, if you take the nest and you don't wait for all the ones that are foraging to come back, you're going to lose some. But remember that queen, like I said earlier, the queen, once her workforce is created at the beginning of the year, she does not leave. So if you take that nest because you didn't have the ability to come back later, you're going to lose some workers, you're going to lose some bees, but you still got the queen, and she's still going to lay queens later in the season. Um, During the time of issues with bumblebees, beekeepers can make it. Okay. So bumblebees really aren't an issue for people until about June and into July. If you're a commercial beekeeper where you have all the hives that need to be put out and it's canola season, you might not have the time to do the bumblebees. But for most people, city people, we have a little bit of time where we can actually go get a little bit of money for collecting them. We can bring them back to our yards. You can find some other place that you can take them. Uh, and you make a little bit of money at that time of the year before fall harvest. Uh, every area is going to be different. This year, I found a lot of people in and around Saskatoon that are creating mom and pop farms where the one is creating a raspberry. You pick raspberry farm. There's a strawberry you pick. There's the Saskatoon Berry Ranch. There's places where they could use more of them. So if you don't want them in your yard, you can either donate them to them or you can see if they'd be willing if you were to put more bees in their area that are native pollinators for their produce. Um, and maybe you can make some more money. So this year, these are some that I took photos of today. You can see the size of that, and I'm going to show you. So I don't know. Oh, I got the thing off. So it's just a small little, there we go. The small little hive. And I use them for raising queens and starting new colonies. But that one, the one on the left, you can see these tiny little holes. Those are entrance holes. And then all the way to the far left, at the base of the grass, is a bigger hole. So that one is ready for winter. There's a bumblebee in there. She is going to stay in there until spring and it's ready. This other one on the right had one big hole that is to the very bottom of the screen, just right there. And that is basically their home. Insulation is harder to see when it's this grass makes it so it's simple. But the ones that are in birdhouses, I don't open them up. I just leave them and wait to see if they come back the next year. And so the outcome is this year, I got lots of calls for bumblebees. And the whole goal was to get honeybees if I could, even honeybee removals. But the bumblebees have been a lot of fun. Now, in the photo on the right, you can see in the bottom left corner of that, that's a cardboard box. And because it's outside, you can see portions of that box that are wet. Any place that stays wet for more than 10 days gets mold. So this particular one, I can see that there's going to be an issue. If it stays wet, I'll have to get it off wherever it is or put something over top of it so that it can dry because you don't want to have that mold inside. They would have never chose that. They want a place that's dark, protected, and dry. And if you can give them that, it's great. One year I tried to put in a frame of honey that came from another hive, and I just thought, well, here's some resources. It's close to where you're at. And they really didn't care so much for it. The pollen that was in it, that it didn't seem like they used, and the honey that was in it, they preferred to go get their own. And so that's a whole bunch of stuff. Do you have questions?
I guess if people could just use either you could type your questions into the chat, or if you go down on the panel at the bottom where it says react and you press the little arrow, you can put up a hand gesture or raise your hand. There might be another spot for that. I do have a kind of review question for you, Albert, just so I make sure I got it right when I go out and I try to collect a nest. So if I take a shoebox, um, once I place it into the shoebox and I want them to settle in there in the evening, so you close the lid completely and you keep a hole in the side, or do you just keep that shoebox open?
So the shoebox, before I even use it, I make sure that there's a way that I can have a hole in that shoebox that I can open up. If you just cut a little drawbridge that you can have pull down or push up to close it, kind of like we do in the nukes, the plastic nuke boxes that we get. Um, but when you leave it there before night, everything has to be open because they're trying to figure out where home is gone. It's not where it was before. They used to walk in the dirt, or they used to have tunnels. Now that's all changed. They'll find where their family is. And so when you come back, you want to close it all up, close up that little drawbridge, close it all up, put it in your car, put it in the back of your pickup, take it home. Once you have it to where you want it, uh, you don't want to have rain that just can fall right on it. Once you have it at night, open it up. Don't wait for the next day. Open it up. That little drawbridge, you don't have to open the top. That's too much. Just open the little drawbridge. It's a little hole, and they'll find their way in and out, and they'll treat it as their new home. So I regularly put them in the back of my wife's car. Um, yeah, she's laughing. She hasn't had a problem yet. We did drive back from Alberta a year or so ago with some nukes in the car, and bees got out, and she got used to having them fly on the inside of the car. I'm not sure what she would do with bumblebees because they're a little bit more intimidating. Uh, Honeybees look for glass and want to get out. I haven't seen what a bumblebee does with the glass in the inside of the car yet. But typically, while you're driving with them, it's night, it's dark. So they're not wanting to come out. They might be making a lot of noise, but they're staying in that box. And the next day, they'll come out just like honeybees do and figure out this is our home, this is where things are. And they'll slowly come and they'll come back that same day. So they did orientation flights just like the honeybee did.
Thank you. Um, I see. So do you know how many different types of bumblebees, let's say, there
Yeah.
are in your region or
No,
maybe
in
Canada?
Utah, I did. I knew that there were 16 different varieties in Utah, and the university, Utah State University up in Cache Valley, actually had a little poster with all the different colorings and markings for all the different types of bumblebees. I haven't seen anything like that here in Saskatchewan. I I don't know how many different ones we have here in Saskatchewan. But if they can survive the winter, there's some pretty good dang bees. And for pollination, especially in spring, if you have orchards or fruit trees, if it means having a bumblebee nest or two to make it so that you have more produce, if your honeybees didn't make it through the winter and you're stuck, but you want the pollination, the bumblebees are a great insurance. If it's that they both survived, but it turned out that it was cold and wet, well, bumblebees are going to continue to fly, whereas your honeybees are stuck inside their hive. So it just makes sense to me now that I want to have both of them in my yard. It helps with overlap. It seems like very few things compete with the two, and they work well together. I have my bumblebee little hives all around where my honeybee hives are, and they come out, they fly away, they come back. They don't compete, and if they
Yeah,
compete, maybe in the environment there is some, but I haven't seen it.
sure. I guess on that note, I see Ron Mickshaw is here, and he did a lot of work in Calgary, looking at that kind of who's foraging on what. I don't know if you feel like talking tonight, Ron. If you want to, you're welcome to chime in, as well as on Bumblebee variety. Um, Other than that, I see there's a couple questions. Go ahead, Ron, if you're.
Yeah, I'll answer that question as briefly as I can. But first, I want to thank Albert. This has been really fascinating. I really like seeing your work and what you're doing to try to rescue these bees so that they're not killed and relocate them. In Alberta, we recognize that there are probably 30 to 35 species of bumblebees. So it probably would be similar in Saskatchewan, although we do have a few differences with our change in elevation and some of our mountain bumblebees. But I'm guessing you probably have at least 20 different species in around your area. The town of Calgary has about 16 itself. So you can see that, to have 35 or so species, you have to have some variation in geography. But yeah, this has been really interesting, and I really appreciate hearing you. I do have one kind of quick question. I had to relocate quite a few box, like I put domiciles out. I put about 300 or 400 domiciles out in and around Calgary and had to move them into research locations. I lost an awful lot of them, and I'm just wondering, um, you know, I might have been doing something totally wrong in my moving, or do you make an effort to face in the same direction as when you pick them up, or ground ones go back under the ground? And like I'd like to hear a little bit more about your technique.
With honeybees, there's times where I keep, and I'm going to explain both. But with honeybees, there's times where I keep the direction and everything the exact same because I don't want them to know that there was a change. There's other times where I want them to do a reorientation flight because things have changed. So with the bumblebees, I try to make it so that they're actually, there's a wall there, something is totally changed so that they do an orientation flight. Um, and they rezone to this new place because it's nowhere near what it was where they came from. And I'll know in spring how well I did this year. But I have noticed from last year to this year, I had some that survived. Sometimes the queens don't like the new location. It could be too hot because they like cool locations. They don't want to have to cool things off. So that's why the rock piles, that's why the brick piles, that's why the garages underneath cement. So if we're putting them out in a field, but if it's covered, if it's cool, they have to decide whether it's a place that they want to keep living in. Um, when I was in Utah, Jamie Strang, Dr. Strang, was up in Logan, and his specialty was bumblebees. And one of the things that he said is that you don't know when the queens, if they're going to accept the new queens are going to accept the hive or the nest, or if they're going to go off and find another one. But if they do, the issue is if the queen survived and it just went to a new location, you still have them in the area. You just don't have them in your control. And for me here, I'm not so concerned about having them in my control unless I decide I want to get into some kind of commercial thing where I'm selling the ones that I'm getting and I want to make sure that they're going to the new location. Um, but I'm also just as happy to have those bees in my neighborhood doing what pollinators do. I tried to do last year, I tried to save a bat that I found, put it in the same hive, and it hung itself upside down. I thought that was really cool. But in spring, it didn't survive. But I thought it was worthwhile trying.
Yeah.
So I think there's a percentage that just simply won't like the change. Either something has moved, maybe the heat is, I don't know. Um, but next spring, I'll have a better statistic of how many stayed, how many moved. Um, I haven't tried to figure out how do you count how many bumblebees are on your bush and are there more this year than there were last year? That would be a neat thing for me to know because then it would tell me that there are bees that stayed in the area and it's building up the area population. Um,
Yeah. So many great questions coming in here that I want answers to as well. But can I interject briefly and say, so what I saw that you put it in the box. So I guess my worry would be someone who's not familiar with bumblebees is like, oh, okay, I see a wooden box and the nest in there. So it doesn't need to be particularly buried or anything like that to be able to survive through this cold weather. No.
No, they need to be in a sheltered place. If you can, like this time of year, those bumblebees that are inside those boxes that I have, they're pretty much going to be there until spring. And so, can you cover up so that they're covered with leaves versus having snow? The snow is going to be wet, it's going to wreak havoc. So, can you cover it up with leaves? Can you cover it up with grass? That's where they would have chosen nature. Hence the compost heaps. Um, if it's cardboard, just know that it's a wick, and that could cause a problem long term. Wood, any kind of a wood box, it doesn't matter what kind. Uh, would you
Sure.
use styrofoam? I don't know if I'd use styrofoam just because lots of styrofoam outgasses and they're particular. I don't know if I'd use it. I have never found a bumblebee in with styrofoam, and there's a lot of styrofoam that's used in construction for walls. Maybe not so much here, but in Utah. And you would think that it would be cool enough for them, but I've never found them behind a styrofoam wall. So I don't know if I'd use styrofoam, but they've been inside sofas, they've been inside barbecues, they've been inside almost
Right.
everything you can think of. But it has to be
Um,
waterproof, preferably.
right.
Plastic, maybe, as long as it doesn't have an odor.
Another question was, could you tell us a bit about how you structure your fees? Do you have like set mileage or an hourly rates? And I know you mentioned before a one visit or a two visit. Is that like depending on convenience, or is that depending on how much a client wants to pay? And like, does that change a lot in terms of the collection of total bees?
Um, with bumblebees, when the season's first starting out, I usually charge $50. That's just because it doesn't take much. I'm already driving all over the city. I really don't care. I would like to see how they're all doing, where they're living. I loved getting photographs of them all. But then as the season progresses and I'm getting lots of calls, it's usually $100. And people, if they have to hire an exterminator, go price it out. It'll blow your mind. There's exterminators that are charging $300 and $400, $600 for killing, whether it be wasps, hornets, or whatever. And so when you think $100 seems like it might be a lot, I'm getting tips beyond that. So $100 isn't that much. And if you're solving their problem, if they have a wedding in that yard that they're preparing for and they want them out, if they have dogs that are getting stung, kids that are at risk, they think that they have anaphylactic issues, that $100 is really not a big deal. Now, in Winnipeg, where if it's in the city or Calgary or Edmonton, even Saskatoon, I can get anywhere in the city in 15 minutes. So it's not a big deal. Your other cities, yeah, they're bigger. So what would you charge? You have to base it on your travel time. In Utah years ago, our minimum in construction to just go to a house and do nothing else was $75. When I left, it was $150. So what is your time worth? If you're driving from point A to point B and it's taking you 45 minutes, you have to cover your time. When I head out of town to the bedroom communities that are outside of the city, 15, 20 minutes, they know that they're going to be charged $50 to $100 extra by other contractors coming out to their cities. And so you can charge even more. For honeybees, if I'm getting a swarm, I don't charge nothing. If it's something simple, if it's that I'm doing a cutout, uh, to come and look at a cutout is $50. If I'm cutting in and removing something, it's 250 an hour. And doing the removal, I have done so many, from trees, from buildings, from everything you can think of. Most honeybee removals I can do cutting them out and putting them back together within about 4 hours. But there's some that you just can't. They get into places that you can't open up. There was one at Lagoon in Utah that they got shut down because the health department said there were too many bees in the park. Well, when I got to the park, I could see bees flying. Nobody else is there, just me. It's the middle of the day. I could see bees flying from trash can to trash can to trash can. They're the best recyclers of sugar on the planet. And so I said, first thing is you got to put lids on all your trash cans. And they said it's $150,000. We already ordered them. And so I went and looked. There were two colonies living in Lagoon. One was in a concrete column that had a little hole. Why that hole was there, I have no idea. And so that one, you couldn't get them out. So we just plugged the hole. Done. The other one was inside a tree. And even though this class is about bumblebees, this is a fun story. The first batch of honey that I got to inside this tree was red, 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 red. And I taste everything inside of a beehive, and it was tiger blood snow cone. They made honey from all of these trash cans, and it was tiger blood snow cone. I've kept some, I still have it. I went further into that hive, and the next combs that I found were black, jet black. Well, what's that? I tasted it. It was Coca-Cola. And so they were actually keeping the stuff distinct in the cells. The red stuff had changed all the drones to red. You could see their abdomens were red because of all the coloring. It was incredible. But sometimes you can remove them, sometimes you can't. And in the case of the tree, I was able to open it up, seal it off. There's still tin spray painted brown that if you go to Lagoon by the water park, you'll see it. That column, inside it, there's some dead honeybees. But even with bumblebees, there's some places that they go that you simply cannot remove. Could you put a one-way trap? Well, you're never going to get the queen. The queen is in there. She stays in there. And so you might get, when she lays a new queen, maybe at that point, because they have to go mate, if you seal it, then it's done. But the ones that you can't open up, the ones you can't get to are really tough. People try to plug them up with spray foam. They can dig through the spray foam. They can dig through it when it's wet. They can dig through it when it's dry. You can put rocks and pebbles because they have a harder time with that. Dirt, they'll dig through. Wood chips, they'll dig through. Bumblebees are fairly strong.
Was another question on any advice multiplying nests once you have one? It sounds like this person may want to try to multiply their nests. It's more up to the queens, I'm guessing.
Yeah, they have to decide in their location. Unless, but okay, look at these birdhouses. I've collected a ton of birdhouses this year that are filled with bumblebees. So if you have bumblebees in your yard that you brought in and you know that they're going to shoot off queens, I would give them the lamb's wool, give them the llama wool, whatever nesting material, maybe put some into some of these birdhouses. The birds don't go in mid-year. They go at the beginning of the season. So if you have these birdhouses that are empty, that's an option for a bumblebee. It's an option for a wasp. So if you were trying to do, if you will, splits, putting birdhouses, it would be a perfect thing for them to go. And yeah, I would think that that would be an option. I haven't tried it, but they seem to love it.
Okay. If anyone has any final questions, you can speak up or put it in the chat and we'll get to it. I see, I mean, I don't necessarily mean to call on this person, but I see John Russell is here from Winnipeg, and he's been doing some of this work, I believe. And John, you don't have to speak up, but if you had anything to share or to comment or ask, I know you have some experience. It's nice to hear everyone's different experiences. Feel
Yeah,
free to.
well, I was sort of monitoring and directing the Red River Apiaries Association Swarm Patrol, sort of an agreement we've got with the city of Winnipeg when they started or permitted urban beekeeping. So you'd get swarm calls, like tons of them. And again, like your experiences, Albert, hornets, wasps, bumblebees,
And everybody knows what it is.
And it got to the point where, I really wanted to conserve the bumblebees. So I started relocating them for free. And it just got to the point where I'm spent, it's eating the profits from my honey business because I'm on the road every evening. I would do it a little bit differently though, because I would come at dusk and I'd wait till the bees, like I would, if some nests you'd have to make 2 trips, but some of the really easy ones, like if they moved a deck box or something and they were just in a mound of grass clippings or straw, I'd be able to kind of get them in one shot. You just would have to have a deft touch. But one of the things I just wanted to clarify is most of the calls I would get for bumblebee removal, I would just kind of explain to the homeowner what bumblebees are and their life cycle and the fact that they're kind of a one season bee and it would be a self-solving problem. But I also realized that that's kind of subspecies specific where in your experience, and I just want to confirm this, do you find that an unleft nest will still retain a queen into the following season? Or do they usually just gravitate to just somewhere very close nearby? Or
I've had that have stayed, but I would say a lot find new locations.
Yeah. Because in my experience, when I would rescue them, like the colonies would be pretty active. I would have these boxes all over the place. And they would be quite healthy until October, around, and then, suddenly the nests would start to be broken down by other insects like ants that would start to, consume the wax and they would basically be abandoned. I don't think I've ever found a queen actually staying, but could be because of the transplants. So
yeah, a lot of the workers will be dead by then.
Mhm.
And so all that's left is the queen. The one that I went to look at today, I opened up a whole bunch, and one of them I wanted to dig through so that I could actually say, is there something there or not? And the one I dug through, it was probably my 3rd or 4th last one, so a couple months ago, and it still had a bumblebee in there, a nice big one,
Nice.
so she's still there. One is still there. Is that the old one that died? Is that a new one that is now laying and waiting until next season? I'll know that next year.
I really enjoyed your talk. I really came here to learn new tricks and learn a different perspective, because basically I self-taught how to do this, and I kind of just naturally started devising my own methods. But I really appreciate you being for a really nice presentation and laying out way better than I could ever on the process, and encouraging other beekeepers to do it, because you're absolutely right with the difference between an exterminator and bumblebee removal, because the homeowner wants to do the right thing and the exterminators are just ravenous when it comes to fees. So you can kind of make everybody feel good about the situation.
Yeah, and there's ones that I've explained, like you said earlier. Uh, are they bothering you, or what is the issue? And there are those that have decided to leave them right where they were. And our goal for things that we don't understand is we want to kill it. And that's our society. If there's a bug that we don't understand that is walking across our property, doing who knows what, it doesn't have our permission, we want to kill it. But in our ecosystem, there's a lot of things that can survive with us here, and we just have to learn to be tolerant of it. Now, if they have a dog, if they have kids that are poking around, well, it's tough. But I had actually quite a few this year where, after explaining, they decided they wanted to just leave them. And I think that's a great education to the public. And uh, hmm, yeah, that's awesome. So thanks, John.
Go
Yeah,
ahead, Ron.
thank you. Thank you. I just want to add a little bit to the person who was, I think it's Karen, um, who wanted advice on multiplying nests. And what I want to say is that you really can't divide a bumblebee nest the way you could a honeybee colony. So you need to know that first. Instead, what you want to basically focus on is making your property as advantageous for a bumblebee colony to live and survive the winter as possible. So for most people, this would mean putting in more native plants into your backyard. And as Albert pointed out, the bumblebees are going to stay pretty close to your backyard. So whatever you can do to entice them to be happy and stay close to home, the more likely you're going to have survivors. You might also want to leave a small space, maybe just a few square meters, that you don't mow, you don't touch. You just let old rose bushes and rods and weeds just kind of grow up, and don't disturb the soil. Because when the typical bumblebee cycle is that by the middle or end of September, generally all the bumblebees are dead, including the original queen bee. But the ones who do survive to repopulate the next year have already left, already mated, and left that nest. Now, if you want to put out a wooden box or a nest of any sort, a really good resource, and I know you're in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, but the Alberta Native Bee Council, just look up Alberta Native Bee Council, do a Google search, and we have directions for building domiciles, the right sizes, the right size hole to put in. They're not that difficult to make. I put up roughly 400 empty domiciles with nothing else in them, just 400 domiciles, mostly above ground, like about a meter high, most of them unpainted, and most of them facing towards the north or northeast and not towards the south. And those are apparently the best directions and the best setting to attract bumblebees in the spring. So you'd put these out in April before the bumblebees have come out of the ground and they're looking for a nest, and they'll find your boxes. Now, here's the sad part, and it is that over the years and over different researchers, including my own results, only between 20 and 25% of the empty domicile boxes that you'll put out in your backyard will have a family settle in it. So the queens are highly selective. If you want to increase your chances but not guarantee them, you could put 4 or 5 up and play the odds, and you might get one or you might get 2 or 3. It's all a matter of the year, how many emerge in the spring from the ground, how successful they are, how many are looking for the box that you put up. But those are the things I'd like to add to the advice on multiplying your nest. Great idea. I think you and actually, Albert, I'd really appreciate hearing how you're saving these bees and bringing them home. Uh, that's you know educating people, educating the public. They're, like you said, they're scared of anything that's crawling across their property. But if you can convince them that these are good creatures, maybe let them live through the season like John had suggested, or if they're able to be moved so that big party that's coming up, uh, won't be disturbed, then yeah, move them. So anyhow, this has been a really nice evening. I appreciate being able to see this, and want to thank Matthew too for extending an invitation out to Calgary for me to join in. Thank you.
Well, yeah, it's actually funny talking here with Albert in Saskatoon, John Russell in Winnipeg, Ron in Calgary, and I always love, I followed the Regina Bee Club a lot on Facebook over the years, and I lived in Montreal working in urban beekeeping. Amanda with the KRTP also worked in urban beekeeping in Montreal. So it's actually really nice and fun to connect with other beekeepers from other cities, different geographies, different densities of beehives. Today we're focused on bumblebees, of course, but just plant some seeds in my mind for some intercity urban beekeeping connections in the future. But I think that's all the questions in the chat. So I think for now, I mean, I just want to thank Albert so much for taking the time to prepare this presentation and to do this. Yeah, I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to trying to relocate my first bumblebee nest this coming year, if the opportunity arises. And I might leave a last word to Albert in case you want to say anything.
No, if anybody has any questions or any want help, you can always send me an email or a text message, and that would be fine.
Excellent. Okay. Well, on that, thank you everyone for coming out, and have a great rest of your evening.